Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. This afternoon is a good afternoon to give you an update on the Farmall MD because it's pouring outside. Thunder and lightning, pouring rain. It's been this way every day, I think, this week. All 5 days, every afternoon and evening. We're getting a ½ inch to an inch of rain. It's starting to hurt things. The beans next door are starting to yellow up from all the water washing through the soil. So hopefully it'll end soon. Hopefully I can send some to you guys out west that need it. You saw me use the MD earlier this year to TED first cutting hay, and it didn't give it the workout that I would like. At the same time, I've been battling most of the usual kind of tune-up or tune-in or break-in issues, except multiplied because this engine is a lot more complicated than a regular engine. There have been the usual leaks. Most notable is this darned water trap here. Kept leaking. I tightened it, it kept leaking, and I wound up taking it all apart, and I actually cut a new gasket out of cork for it, and I found some diesel resistant sealer for the gasket. I took it back off, put it all back together. Now it's been tight for a couple weeks. I've run it, and that was the biggest one I fixed, but I had lots of little leaks on fuel lines. Sometimes I had to replace some of the ferrules on them to get it to stop leaking. I put a gauge on, which is the pressure gauge off of the injection pump, and all that gauge does is tell you when there's a lot of restriction on the fuel filters when they get clogged up, and tells you need to change a fuel filter. But anyway, I bought a gauge, I put it on. The gauge lasted about 3 hours. It filled with diesel, it crapped out, and that's one of the reasons I say new gauges are hard to find. Good new gauges are hard to find. After the initial few drives, I had to clamp down on the wheel clamps on the front wheels because, as you can see, they slid around the rim. Luckily, they didn't kill the valve stem here. That's a normal thing. You got to crank down on these till they seat in good and tight. They seem to be tight now. One of the things that's been puzzling me that I would like to fix, but it's really not the end of the world, is the idle speed on gasoline. Of course, there's no throttle to control the engine RPMs when you're running on gasoline. And I set the air valve on the top of the carburetor to the spec clearance, which I think was 3/32 or 5/64, something like that, when I rebuilt the carburetor, and it idles fast. It used to, before the rebuild, when I was younger and ran the tractor, idle on gasoline at, I would say, 700 or 800 RPMs, you know, kind of a low idle. And now it idles very fast, kind of like, you know, if you throttle the H up to maximum RPM. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but anyway, I pulled the carburetor off and I adjusted that air valve down. So instead of the 3/32 spec clearance, I'm down at like half that now, which 3/32 divided by 2, I guess, is 3/64. And it didn't change the RPMs at all, which really puzzled me. It stayed exactly the same fast RPMs. The only thing I can think of is that the electronic ignition that I put into it has a hotter spark and there's a more complete fuel burn, and maybe that's driving up the RPMs of the tractor. At this point, I've kind of accepted it as something that's just going to be. Also on this side of the engine, here's the gasoline starting tank. And two things about the gasoline starting tank. This tank is on a non-adjustable set of mounts. Well, there's a little bit of adjustment, but as you can see, it's way back in the hood, and the hood is where it should be in alignment with the fuel tank. No adjustment, hood in alignment. Doesn't fit the hole. You can see where the hole had been carved out here previously. I thought about making some brackets to move the fuel tank ahead, but there's other stuff in the way, so I thought, well, geez, I got to fix the hole anyway when I do the sheet metal work. I might as well just move the hole back to where the tank is and let live. The other thing about the gasoline fuel tank, if you watch the series when I was rebuilding it, it was really rusty inside, and I had to dose it with muriatic acid 3 times to get all the rust out. Well, it turns out that the tank leaks. Apparently, and it's just little pinhole stuff. It's just a wetness you feel on the underside of the tank when it's got gasoline in it, see, like that. So what I did is I bought a POR 15 sealing kit, which is the metal prep elements and then the POR 15 coating for inside of the tank. Usually I'm not a fan of tank sealers. I'd rather clean the tank and not have the potential for a sealer to come loose, flake off, and get in the fuel system later on. But I have coated tanks before and I've never had a problem with it. This is definitely something I need to do with this one. As you can see, I did get the sheet metal fitted. It's in pretty good position now. but it took some doing. There is a brace rod that goes back through here underneath the hood and holds the top of the radiator in place. Otherwise, it'd just have the hoses holding it in place. So I had to adjust the radiator brace rod, and in order to pull the radiator back to get proper fit here, I had to shorten the radiator hoses because, of course, when you shorten the brace rod, it pulls the radiator back and the hose starts to kink up and you get a lot of resistance. So anyway, I had to shorten the hoses to get the radiator in the right spot. I also had to shim up the radiator. I put some shim washers underneath the mounts for the radiators, and I only had to bring it up about 1/4 inch because the fan was hitting the shroud on the radiator, and that fixed it. I also had a few issues with the water pump and the thermostat housing. You probably can't see it up in here. The water pump seeped, and that's normal when you do these because there's a packing in the front. I had to take the drive off the front of it and then put some more packing material in it and tighten it down. Now it doesn't leak at all. If these are packed correctly and tightened correctly, they shouldn't leak at all. This one doesn't leak at all anymore. I had a leak in the thermostat housing. It's a long flange and there's only 2 bolts to hold the 2 halves together. So I take that back apart and I use some Permatex right stuff instead of the regular gasket to hold that together and be leak proof. One of the frustrating things after I finished all this work on the front end is I hadn't done anything to the back end, and when I put gear oil in the transmission and final drive, it started leaking like a sieve, which was to be expected. It leaks out the PTO in the back. It leaks out the axle seals on both sides where the axles come out of the housing. It leaks on the transmission drive shaft out of the engine and the counter shaft, which is lower than that drive shaft. It leaks all over the place. In fact, the oil's traveling down here and dripping out of the bell housing here, and it's just going to have to wait till winter. But fortunately now the engine has 0 leaks in it. No fuel leaks, no oil leaks, no coolant leaks. I'm pretty proud of that. It took me a while to get it that way. Here's a mystery to me that maybe somebody can shed some light on. I'm pretty good with wiring and all that kind of stuff, electrical stuff, but this ammeter, which I bought new, again, gauge problems, always reads discharge when it's charging. It always reads backwards, so it always reads discharge when it's charging. Now, usually with any other ammeter I've had, if I go oops and I've hooked it up backwards, I just switch the connections and that takes care of it. But no matter how I switch the connection on this, it always reads discharge. And it's not that I have a discharge someplace in the system, because it reads it as it would when you first start up the tractor and the battery's topping itself off. So it'll start out at about 30 amps and then it'll come right back up to 0 in a few minutes. It's a mystery to me. I've never seen an ammeter work this way. And it's not like the wiring is hard on this tractor. In fact, it's the simplest tractor I think I have for wiring. To hook up the ammeter, all I have is one wire going from the alternator to one post of the ammeter, and then from the other post of the ammeter I have a wire going to the battery. So there's nothing simpler than that. The way I'm going to solve that issue is I have 3 or 4 spare ammeters. One of the things I do in the winter when I have a little time is I actually fix old international or original ammeters off tractors. They're really easy to fix. I just need to take that one out and put another one in, and it'll be the process of elimination. The biggest hurdle I think I have right now on this tractor is figuring out how I can work the snot out of it for a few hours, half a day. The engine needs that. When I had it out tedding, the engine wasn't running as smoothly as I would like, and I attributed that to really not having it loaded as much. It really needs to be loaded to seat the rings in. So while I was tinkering with all this stuff, I took it out one day and I ran it up the biggest hills we have around here while I was standing on the brakes at the same time, till black smoke poured out of the exhaust, which was kind of cool to see. And the engine RPMs were pulled down by the load. And I did that over and over again, and it ran smooth. You know, I'd come up off those hills and have a great running tractor, no smoke, smooth running. I need to hook it up to, you know, ideal would be a dynamometer. I don't have access to a dynamometer any place where I can conveniently drive this tractor to. I have tillage equipment that'll work it well. I've got a set of 3 bottom plows that'll work it. I've got a 14-foot disc. a 14-foot tandem disc that I could hook up and run part ways out of the ground because it wouldn't be able to handle the whole disc. And I have a set of drags that would probably work it pretty hard, but the problem is I don't have any ground to till, and I don't have anything I want to plow up, that's for sure. I need all my pasture this summer. So I'm kind of puzzling about that a little bit, what to do to really work it hard. The only thing I can think of that's at all plausible is to wait until winter comes, which I really don't want to wait that long, and then hook it up to a big log out of the woods when we're cutting wood and pull that around the fields, because that'll work it hard. Beyond that, if you have any ideas, I welcome them. I really would like a way to really work this tractor. One good idea I had for working it hard is to put it on the hay bine and run second cutting hay through it. The problem with that is I don't have a hydraulic pump on the tractor right now. I took it off to go through it, and it's a one-way pump. I'd have to change out the cylinder on the hay bine, which is not a problem. I have a one-way cylinder, so that's a possibility. I don't really have a lot else to do with this tractor. I need to repair the fuel tank and do the first oil change, and when I do that, I'll cut apart the oil filter when I take it out to make sure there's nothing that shouldn't be in there. I never intended this tractor to be a daily use tractor. You'll see the Super C in almost every video that I make. That's our daily use tractor. We use it for hauling around wagons. It's easy to get up and onto. It's easy to start. It's just a real handy tractor. This is more of a heavy fieldwork, well, it was back in the day, a heavy fieldwork tractor, and I intend to use it for seasonal use, helping out with haymaking, mainly raking and tedding, and doing manure spreading in the spring. So kind of, you know, split of work between it and the H. I don't know if you remember, but some major reasons that I decided to restore this tractor is that it was my family tractor. It was my dad's tractor, and I used it when I was a kid. It's a unique tractor. There were only about 18,000 MDs made, so it was a challenge because it's got a complicated engine. I liked a challenge, and I'm a tractor collector, and I enjoy restoring tractors. So those factors entered into the equation as well when I decided to restore this tractor. Yes, I could have gone out and bought a regular M for, I don't know, 1,500 bucks and had it running, but there's more to it to me than that. And combined with that kind of hobbyist perspective, I'm a hobbyist who likes to be able to use what he restores. So that seasonal use is where I get the satisfaction of the work I put in restoring it. Now, what about costs? Well, the dust is cleared. I've paid all the credit card bills, and the total spent thus far is $13,946.75. And remember, that's just parts for this engine pretty much. I put in all my own labor. It doesn't include the rear end, but the rear half is going to be a heck of a lot cheaper because it's pretty much just a regular M rear half, not the expense that this engine was. So that's where we stand on the MD. I hope to bring it back out for second cutting hay, assuming I can find a way to work the snot out of it. And then beyond that, I'll be working on it this winter when the weather gets bad. I'm going to split the tractor back apart and go through the rear end, paint that all up, paint the sheet metal, and she'll look like a new tractor again. I hope you enjoyed this update and have a great day.